Hi, welcome to Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Robert Green, and joining me today is Mads. Hey, Mads.
Hey, Robert. How are you
Welcome
doing?
back. Welcome back on the show.
Thank you.
We have a show with Mads, so you know it's going to be exciting and interesting.
Yeah, hopefully.
And today we're talking about keyboard shortcuts. We're not going to go through the full list of keyboard shortcuts. It turns out that there's more going on with keyboard shortcuts than just the actual keyboard strokes.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be a little bit of a different episode maybe than what we usually do because it's gonna be we're gonna go in and we're gonna go a little bit deep into like what makes Visual Studio and like
Okay.
how is the architecture, what are the features behind the features. And so this is really like kind of a deep dive behind the curtain type of thing on how does the shortcut system works because a lot of people they don't fully understand how it works. I think I would say pretty much everybody
Yeah.
doesn't fully understand it,
I
and
I
so
think
uh,
I think that most people probably didn't even know there was a shortcut system to begin with, right?
it's rather elaborate. Yes, it's a big thing
Uh,
in Visual Studio. Yeah,
has it always been elaborate?
yeah.
Or was there a new shortcut system? A new and
No, it's always been elaborate, and for a reason, and I'll go into all that, but it might help explain why you might think that, hey, why can't we just have the same keyboard shortcuts in Visual Studio that we have in other editors and IDs?
Mhm.
And we do add those shortcuts over time and stuff. But why isn't it just always quick to add those things? And so there's reasons for why things are the way they are. And you might think, oh, it's just because Visual Studio is kind of old and it's a lot of like history and that's annoying. But no, that's not the case. There's actually very good reasons for some of these things. So I think we should take a look. So I'm going to open Tools Options and Keyboard. This is the new Tools Options in 2026. But you'll see some of these still open in the old one, the old dialog here. And this one is one of those because it's kind of a more complex dialog. But this is the keyboard settings or options that we have in Visual Studio. And it looks kind of weird. It is also here where you can do everything. You can find actually, I use this dialog to just find commands. Like if I want to find something that has to do with Git, I can just narrow the list down to anything with Git or commit, for instance. So I can find all my commands and I can see what are the shortcut keys. See this one, Control Enter, commit
Mhm.
and push, right? So I can see all these keyboard shortcuts here. It's super handy and I can change anything that I want. So Git, commit, and push, for instance. Let's say I want Control Enter when I'm in my Git changes window, right? And I'm about to commit my changes. When I hit Control Enter, I want commit and sync to be what happens. So how can I take over the commit and push to be commit and sync? Control Enter. All right. So we can come down here and find the Git scope. So this is one thing that I need to explain a little bit. These are scopes, and keyboard shortcuts in Visual Studio can apply to different scopes. The global scope means everywhere, no matter where you are in Visual Studio, what window is active, what text box or whatever that you have the cursor in, this keyboard shortcut works everywhere. But then I can be more specific and I can say, oh no, this should only be for the Git scope. So in the Git windows. And
Ah,
that will override the global scope. So I could have Control Enter in the global scope defined somewhere, but I can override that in a more specific scope, in this case, the Git scope. So that's what I want to do. I want to use the Git and I want to hit Control Enter. I'm just going to type Control Enter like this. It tells me that it's already used by something else. I can just hit Assign, and that is it. So now I've swapped I remapped the shortcut. I moved it from one and added it to another.
I will be perfectly honest with you. I use very few keyboard shortcuts.
Ah,
Control AKF is my favorite because that puts my XAML elements on separate lines. Or I'm sorry,
mhm.
the properties, if you will. And then of course, Control A, Control C, Control V. But
Yep.
I don't do I actually don't use a lot of commands. Never really have. And keyboard shortcuts, I mean,
Well, some people are like keyboard warriors, they just
yeah.
everything they can do in the on the keyboard shortcuts, that's great for them.
So you can define a keyboard shortcut in various scopes
Yep.
and then presumably be able to keep track of what you did. Does it roam from machine to machine? So if you do that at work and go home, is that tied to your account? So each instance will those settings will roam to your home machine if you make a change at work and vice versa.
No, they don't. They do not roam. They're kind of on a little bit of a separate system, but
Okay.
it is something we're looking into adding so they will roam as well. But what you can do is that you can export them and then you can import them
Ah,
in
okay.
other places.
Okay.
There are extensions out there that makes that even easier as well. So there's like a shortcut exporter extension that makes that super simple. So there's definitely ways around it. And it's nice because that way you can kind of create your own keyboard scheme and then, it kind of lives with you and you can take it with you, through your life and make changes as you go.
Yes.
Um, and we also have a bunch of those built in. So we have different keyboard schemes here. So if you, for instance, like, you come from VS Code, that's your muscle memory,
Mhm.
you can map Visual Studio to the Visual Studio Code keyboard shortcuts. So that's kind
So
of neat, right? Or ReSharper or something else.
so if you select Visual Studio Code and then reset, will that
Yeah.
apply them all?
Yep. It
Okay.
basically it removes a bunch and it adds the VS Code keyboard shortcuts. Yep. That way you can have them all synchronized. And VS Code can do the same. They also have like a preset for Visual Studio shortcuts.
Okay. Cool.
A thing we just released with Visual Studio 2026 was that we mapped Ctrl-W to closing the current document or the tool window. And that's something people have been wanting for years, right? Because it's in your muscle memory from browsers and so on. Everybody uses Ctrl-W. Well,
Mhm.
a couple of things on that. Well, first of all, I think Visual Studio existed. We had a keyboard shortcut for that, and with Control F4. Like before browsers had tabs, like before it became an industry standard. So it was not like we chose, let's say we chose the wrong shortcut. That's not what it was. It was just like kind of the industry kind of moved around and settled on something else. We could map that, but then we have to remove it from somewhere else, right? Control
Mhm.
W. What if it was used by something that people use? So normally what we do is that we go in and we look at, hey, these shortcuts are they being used for something else? What are people using them for? And if they have very low usage, then we can remove them, right? We can
Okay.
remap them and use them for something else. And we've done that in a bunch of different ways in recent years. The latest one is the Control W. But there are a few things, right, to think about. If you have a different scheme, like the VS Code scheme, or an old, like a lot of people use some of the older C Sharp 2005 scheme, they're set up differently. So it might be that Control W is available for people that uses the default, but it was taken and used by C Sharp 2005 scheme. And
Okay.
so it would break everybody in depending on what theme you've got or scheme you got selected, right? Which one you're using. So it's not always obvious that the implications of these things are pretty widespread, and but it might not have anything to do with you because you're not using those schemes or whatever. So you don't know it. It's not really transparent to you what's happening.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I just actually tried that. I just had the C sharp scheme, 2005 scheme selected. And when I controlled W, it didn't close the tab.
Yep. That's right.
But when I changed over to the default scheme, then it does change the tab.
Yeah.
So
The only one we haven't been able to do is the C sharp one
okay.
because it is using it, and it also shows a different kind of challenge. So in Visual Studio, we have those keyboard shortcuts that require more than one key. So, for
Mhm.
instance, if you want to format the document, it's Control KD or Control KC to comment a line of code. In the C sharp scheme, Control W was one of those things where if you wanted to open the Solution Explorer, it would be Control WS. So that W but just meant a tool window. And then the following key would then be, S for Solution Explorer, E for Error List, and so on. That means that you can't take Control W because Control W is the first sequence of a longer sequence.
Right.
And we have a few of those. Like, so for the C sharp one, W is one. Control K is one that we have in most other places, right? Control E as well. No, sorry, Control R for I think for the test runner, where they're just the first combination of a longer sequence. It's like this whole very delicate kind of thing where we need to find, it's a puzzle. We need to solve a puzzle to do all these things. And sometimes it's super easy and we can just go ahead and do it. And sometimes it's not. And so for the Ctrl-W, it wasn't super easy, and we ended up implementing it for most people, but not for the C# scheme, which whether you're writing C# or not, it's not determining your scheme. So you could be on the default scheme, even though you identify, let's say, as a C# developer. So you kind of have to go look, and you can always reset your
Right.
your scheme here in the settings. So that's kind of the history and the story behind how we're doing this in Visual Studio. You can see there's a lot of moving parts here.
So if I decided that I want to actually start doing that more often, like there's 10 or 20 things I do all the time, right? Like
Mhm.
commit and push is a good one, or open up Copilot chat if it's not open. I can just go in there and find those commands
Mhm.
and find out if there's an existing shortcut. And if there's not, I can create one for myself, or I could just decide that I want to remap it to something else. And therefore, that's going to be the keyboard shortcut for me. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So you just go search for the command that you want to change the keyboard shortcut for you. Sometimes you may want to remove a shortcut. Like, is it uh let's see here. It's a class view. Where is it? Uh View class view here. Control Shift C. I
Okay.
sometimes hit this by accident because I'm doing Control C to copy, you know,
Okay.
and then I accidentally hit Control Shift C, and then it opens a class view. So it might, to me, that might be like something that I want to remove. Actually, I'm going to do that right now because I do hit this every now and again. So I'm just going to remove it, and that's it.
Okay.
Done. And so yeah, it's not always you want to add. You can also remove. And so anyway, you can make this exactly the way you want it to be.
And then if you mess it up, you can just go reset, or if you already have a bunch set, you export it and then
Yeah,
import it back. So you can get back to some state, right?
exactly. Default and then reset and then remap. I like the import export feature as well.
Where's the import export? Is that
So if you go to Tools,
hmm
Import Export Settings, so you can export settings from here.
okay.
There's
Oh, okay. So
yeah,
that's all your settings. Got it.
that's a bunch of stuff here. Yeah, so
Right.
you can do that.
Okay.
But there is an extension out there called Shortcut Exporter, which
Okay.
also will do this in a very smooth way. Yeah,
Is that one you wrote?
it is actually. Here's another one I wrote. Check this out. Because when we're dealing with keyboard shortcut, Robert, you're saying you're not using that many of them. What if there could be a little keyboard hero like this little window here sitting in the background? And whenever you invoke a command and you're not using a keyboard shortcut, it like logs that information. And then it can present to you in priority order which keyboard shortcut that would be most valuable for you to learn.
That would be very cool. Keyboard hero. We'll obviously put a link to that in the notes.
Yep. Keyboard hero on the marketplace for
Yeah.
free. Yes.
Cool.
And so you don't have to open it, or it just kind of sits in the background and records this. And so whenever you're ready to look at it, you look at it. And maybe sometimes you only have to have it installed for a week or have it, enabled or whatever until you identify and learn those shortcuts. And then you're all set for a little while at least.
Yeah. Awesome.
One thing that we struggle with sometimes, and extenders struggle with this as well, is hey, we have a command and we want to assign a keyboard shortcut to it. It's actually hard to find keyboard shortcuts sometimes because a lot of them have been taken. And
Okay.
so that's like always a challenge to find a really good one. And we're always interested in knowing like what keyboard shortcuts do you find are wrong or which ones would be have we missed? Like it could be, hey, this is an industry standard that we just missed out on or something like that. Or hey, here's something that's not super big in Visual Studio, but if you come from these other apps, you have
Mhm.
a muscle memory and you would just like that to carry through. Like, okay, let's hear it. Let's get all that stuff in and let's just fix it. That's how we've been able to fix a bunch of this stuff recently. Control W is one. Control P, that's for finding for search, code search. That comes from VS Code. The keyboard shortcut for entering the feature search in Visual Studio is Control Q. But if you come from VS Code, you're using the command palette, which is the equivalent, kind of the equivalent, not exactly at all, but that's the closest we got in Visual Studio. and that's Control-Shift-P. And so now we map Control-Shift-P as well. The idea is that we want to make sure that your muscle memory carries over where it matters. And some people they're asking for, hey, can we get this feature or that feature? And we're like, yeah, we already have it. It's just that they don't know because the keyboard shortcut they know does not trigger that feature. And so I really want to encourage you all to let us know, of course, in the comments, but also, send a feedback ticket.
Right.
Um, we're really interested in making these things as good as possible. But I wanted to take a moment and kind of explain to everybody why it's not always as easy for us to do these keyboard shortcuts. Why all these different moving parts that are involved. And so I hope the viewer here has a better understanding of how it works in Visual Studio.
So if I want a particular keyboard shortcut, it should not just be the keyboard combination I want, which of course I can set myself. But if I want it to become the Visual Studio way, I would need to be able to point to all kinds of other applications where it is that way, right? It's got to be more of an industry standard. It can't just be, hey, everybody, let's vote on which one you want, because then 50 different people would have 75 different answers, right?
That's true, but those are the ones we get. We get the ones where people have an expectation of a shortcut to work,
Right.
and it doesn't, right? And so the reason they have that expectation is because they have it from somewhere else. And if we hear the same thing again and again, like, oh, it's from Photoshop, right? Or from VS Code, or from whatever Notepad, or whatever it might be, we wanna honor that as much as we possibly can.
Does the Visual Studio team and the VS Code team sit down and kind of map out keyboard shortcuts together, or is it basically a free for all back and forth and first one in wins?
It's a little bit free for all in that Visual Studio has a bunch of keyboard shortcuts from 28 years ago. Visual Studio is over 28 years old.
Hmm.
And those keyboard shortcuts are just muscle memory for users that have used Visual Studio. And then when VS Code came out, it was brand new. It didn't have that history. And so they could say, okay, what do we do today? What are some good options today? And
Okay.
they went with that, right? And so there was never a reason to kind of try to align more than what made sense. But there's a bunch of industry standards that started in Visual Studio, right?
Yeah.
And so you might not think about them, but they're used in a lot of different apps and stuff today. So I mean, it goes both ways. But at least now you understand, like when we have to change it in Visual Studio, like there's a
Mhm.
bunch of implications that might not be obvious.
Do you think there's a good mix between people like me who are 99% of the time doing things with the mouse versus the other spectrum people who almost always are using keyboard shortcuts and then everything in between? Do we know what the distribution is?
I don't have the number. It's something we can find out if how many people invoke commands using keyboard shortcuts
Okay.
and which keyboard shortcuts. Yeah, but it's very common. Like we see that when we do our user research and we invite people into our lab and we like track their eye movements and we see how they use Visual Studio. We can see that a lot of people do like if they want to build a solution, they right click the solution and say build, or they go to the top level menu and build from there
Yeah.
instead of hitting Control-Shift-B, which it is for me. It's Control-Shift-B. For some people, it's Control F6 or just F6. Again, it's different for who you are, right?
Obviously, Control Shift B is faster than reaching for the mouse, dragging up the build, clicking it, hoping that you actually clicked on build instead of project or debug, then scrolling down to build solution. But given that I don't necessarily have very many memorized, it's like
Right.
how much work do you want to do to get to the point where it's faster and how much time are you willing to lose in the
Yeah.
meantime? But I
I think
guess like anything, you got to train yourself.
it's like that with anything else, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it requires some work up front. That's where that keyboard hero comes in.
I'm absolutely gonna start using that and find out what are the 5 that I need to memorize and just start
Yep.
doing these and then do 5 more, and next thing you know, I'm probably saving time.
Yeah, exactly. I think once you get that list down to like where there's hardly any left, like you're in a really good position. Yeah, and I don't think it's that hard. Like if you have a list and they're all relevant to you because they're literally made for you specifically.
Mhm.
I think it I think it's pretty easy.
Well, that was fascinating. I really enjoyed that. Thanks for coming on and going behind the scenes in the keyboard shortcut system.
Anytime, Robert. Anytime.
And hope you guys enjoyed that. And we will see you next time on Visual Studio Toolbox.